So connected. Morning all, welcome to LoveWorkLife Consultancy 60-minute webinar. See, people are starting to flood in, which is good. If you can hear me, if you can just put a note in the chat box or in the question and answer box, that'd be much appreciated. Hi Sarah, hi Aideen, Candy, good to see you. Paul, you okay? Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you all right.
Good, you okay?
Yeah, I'm really great. Thank you. Really good. Beautiful day. What's not to love?
Come to the north, mate. It's cold at the
north.
north. It's cold in the north. Yeah. Guys, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes as people start coming in. It's quite a busy webinar as this one. We've had quite a lot of late takers, which has been good news. So we'll just give them a couple of minutes to log in, and then we'll kick off. I hope everyone's okay. I hope you've had a good bank holiday and a good VE weekend. And if you haven't, then I don't know what's been going on with you at your side. We had a great street party at our end. Paul, what did you have at your end?
Yeah, it was lovely, actually. Lots of people out. Not obviously social distancing, but VE Day, big day. And it's great, you know, that when you think about the fact that we still celebrate it, because it is such an important time, or such an important time. And my father, bless him, who's nearly 88, was 13 when VE Day happened. So he has a vivid memory of celebrating it. So we still got people around us, friends and family that were around during those times. And, you know, it's important we keep remembering how what we did during the war. It's very, very important. Keep repeating it to the newer generations. Absolutely.
Okay.
Go on, sorry. I was going to say, despite popular belief, I wasn't there. Just I thought I'd mention that. Or somebody else does.
So let's kick off this week's webinar. And this week we've sort of changed tact from where we are to talking about where we should be going and what's going on. And obviously, you know, the word recession has been bandied around quite extensively, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity to really sort of talk about that and how we can sort of negate that and what's going on. And the Bank of England said, and I think the Bank of England's quote was, "It's the sharpest drop of 14% since 1706. Now, obviously, said, Paul, you weren't around in 1706, but that was due to war, and actually, strangely as it happens, we're talking about the weather, it was also due to a very, very large frost,
yep.
Which is a strange thing. So global warming has got one thing for us, that it sort of saves us from economic downturn, that's for certain. So really, Paul, you've been studying sort of the Bank of England, what they've been saying. You've been working with the REC and getting very close to the government.
Yep.
Give us an idea of what the Bank of England actually said, so we can start to make sort of a shape and hear of that.
Well, they finally came out, as most people who are listening here will know, last week, saying that it's time to talk about recession. You know, people probably are well aware that a recession is technically 2 consecutive quarters of decrease in the economy, essentially. So that is where we're at, I'm afraid to say. Hardly a shock, given that in this quarter, we are going to see a 25% decrease in the economy, which is literally unprecedented. But then what would we expect? Nobody is working in the country. The shops are closed. I mean, we're almost completely at a standstill. So despite the fact that they've come out and made the statement, it was hardly the greatest shock in the world. What is interesting is that they're predicting that we are going to see a 14% decrease during the course of this year in the economy, which is a very, very low level of decrease. And as you've just said, I think for the historians amongst us, the last time there was a decrease even close to this was somewhere in the region of 17 something or another, when of course the world was rather different from the one we know today. I think there is some sort of good news, if you like, around all of this, if we can sort of pick that up. And that is that they're also suggesting that in 2021, we're going to start to see a very sharp increase backwards, in fact, a 15% increase during the course of next year. But it is very clear from what they're saying that we are now entering a very difficult and challenging economic period. As I say, it can't be a shock to anybody. We knew that was coming, but it's out there in the open now. We must remember something really important here, Howard, and that is that, we've entered this situation not because of an economic crisis prior to the coronavirus, but because of a humanitarian crisis. The coronavirus is a humanitarian crisis. Our economy was in good shape prior to this situation. We are now paying the price of closing down the country for this is the 8th week, is it now, of lockdown? There's some good signs coming out about companies going back in certain sectors, construction and manufacturing now, but unquestionably the impact is enormous and will be enormous. So, we are going to go through this period now up until the Christmas period with a gradual improvement, but we are in for a tougher time. So it is what it is. You and I want to talk about today how we're going to get through this, pass on our experiences, our knowledge of recessions, because we are old, unfortunately, or fortunately, and we have been through several recessions and indeed a depression. I would suggest most of us on this call will recall the 2008 banking crisis, collapse of the banks. That was, by any definition, a depression, bailed out by the banks. So we've been through this. You and I have been through this since I've been through it. The 70s, this will be maybe the 4th recession I've been through. So we want to pass on our knowledge and experience to people listening today, and indeed get the views of the guys listening in terms of how they see things going, and talk through how we're going to weather the storm and improve our positioning from a market perspective.
I think you're right in what you're saying there. It's a humanitarian situation rather than an economic situation. And I started to look at this to sort of get some idea, because we always say you should sort of view what has happened in the past to really get an idea of what's going on into the future. And this slide here is quite an interesting one that, we've not seen anything like this since 1918, which was the Spanish flu and the Great Depression. And this is a graph that actually shows the Dow Jones response to the Spanish flu, and it grew by a 33% connection on the rebound, which sort of shows how the market happened. It dropped very, very quickly, as you can see there in 2018, and then a period of lockdown when they sort of were managing with that and the economic climate with regards to the Great Depression. But then you saw a massive increase. Certainly it's just showing 1919 here. But if you go all the way through to 1926, there's a huge uplift within the Dow Jones. So it sort of shows what's going on. In the UK, though, it's a slightly different sort of thing. You look at the unemployment's been its highest since 2010. And when I started in recruitment in 1991-92, unemployment was at 10.5% of the workforce. It's now at 3.8%. The forecast is going to be at the end of Q2, it will be over 10%. But in Q4 2021, that 10% will have dropped back down to 5.5%, which sort of says between Q2 and Q4 of next year, there's going to be a massive amount of growth within the marketplace. And if you start to look at what we're sort of looking at, we talk about different things. And we put it on here. This is an economic downturn in the 2000s, the dot-com crash. And you can see there the SARS, which was a humanitarian, the little bubble, but you can see how quickly SARS came back, or the market came back after SARS. And this is the Dow Jones. When you start to look at the Dow Jones from the 2008 economic crash and how the gradual increase has happened over the last 10 years, the last 2-3 years, a huge increase. So it says, if we look at what happened in 2018 and the sharp uptake in business, there's going to be a massive opportunity for everybody to sort of make money if we're in the right position. So really what we've seen from our recessions is lots of success is generated during a recession. So what do you think, Paul, a successful recession-proof agency actually looks like?
Well, let's just talk that through. And I think I just want to re-emphasize a point that, what we're going to go through, what we're going through right now is unprecedented, because this is a recession being caused by a pandemic. All previous recessions, including the one you made reference to in 1706, the worst that they've got on record, was caused by other issues to do with the economy and not to do with something on regarding a pandemic. There's just another quick point, and this is now not talked about. Maybe that will be very pleasing to Boris Johnson, but Brexit was always coming around the corner. You know, we had to do deals with Europe before the end of the year. Who knows? It's very possible now that we'll be going into 2021 with no deal being done with the European community. There'll be some people quite pleased about that, but that's a fact. And I think the truth is that regardless of the pandemic, we were always going to see this year as potentially a downturn. You know, the outcome of Brexit was always going to be placing some pressure on the economy. So this was coming, guys. And obviously nobody could have seen this coming. In terms of what we can see typically from recessions, well, as Howard has said, you know, we've worked through several of these, and I think we'll begin to see something very close to what we've seen in the past coming out of this. So those of you guys that have been in recruitment for some period of time, you'll know that when we come into a recession, obviously there is a significant drop in permanent vacancies. You know, and you wouldn't need to be an economist to recognize that that is a distinct possibility now, because we are going to hear, I'm sure, later on today from the Chancellor that he will be extending the furlough scheme. The rumor is, what they're leaking is that they may continue it into September, but on a reduced level of 60% subsidy rather than the 80% they're providing at this moment. Now, I think that's everything to do with suppressing unemployment rates. However, I do think that we're going to see a level, as Howard just described, a spike in unemployment. Lots of businesses, I'm afraid, will be releasing staff. We will see that. You guys know that. You're already hearing about it, I'm sure. The only reason it hasn't happened to the degree it would have happened is because of furloughing, the subsidy of furloughing. So there'll be a suppression of that unemployment level, but there will be unemployment. What that will do, as far as our clients are concerned, is will make them very jumpy and nervous initially about recruiting people, permanent staff in those positions, particularly if they make redundancies. They won't be able to go out and recruit new permanents for a period of time. So what does that mean? It means that we'll be moving into a period of trading where the supply of interim staff will become important again. It's always been important, but that ability to provide temporaries, good old-fashioned PAYE temporaries, will be there. Where our employer clients want extra staff, where they need people, they'll be much more comfortable taking people on for an interim period rather than necessarily committing to perm staff. That isn't to say there'll be no perm market. I don't want you guys to think that I'm saying there's no perm market. There will be a perm market. And particularly in the specialist areas, and we know those sectors will be in places like IT and in finance sectors, and certainly obviously healthcare and construction. There'll be lots of sectors still taking on perm staff, but others will be less confident about that. And interim temp staff will become something we will start to see quite a lot of very shortly, I believe. So I think those are the kind of things that we can expect to see. I believe also that we're going to see a lot of additional candidates. And I've been saying to my clients, right now is the right time to be talking to candidates to establish who's immediately available. And you're going to be hearing a lot about candidates that have suddenly become available through the unfortunate necessity that clients are going to be putting into laying people off, unfortunately. So you'll have no sort of shortage of people available in that sense. So you're going to be flooded, I think, with candidates. It's important for us to disseminate and find out which candidates we can place quickly. There's a very interesting quote I've seen from Bain & Co., which I'm just going to read to you verbatim, which I thought was useful to pass on. What they've said, this quote is quite interesting. It says, think of a recession as a sharp curve on an auto racetrack, the best place to pass competitors, but requiring more skill than a straight track. The best drivers apply the brakes just ahead of the curve, and in brackets, they take out excess costs. So I think we've already done that. We've been breaking into that curve over the last 7-8 weeks, looking at our costs, considering how we reduce them. The government have helped us in that sense as well. Then they're saying here, we turn hard towards the apex of the curve. So we are now into that curve, that apex of the curve, we're in it. And in brackets, it says, identify the short list of projects that will form the next business model. And we want to come back to that point in a minute. And then accelerate hard out of the curve. And in brackets, spend and hire before markets have rebounded. So that's, I think, a brilliant quote, which is why we got the graphic of the car here. We've already been braking coming into the curve. We're now in that curve. We need to be thinking about the projects that we need to be working on so that as we come out of the curve, we can get our foot onto the accelerator and start to get some speed. So that's, I think, Howard, what we want to be talking about during the course of this particular webinar.
So I think that sort of puts it all down to a couple of things then, Paul. I think that talks about looking towards the future and looking ahead. And I think that looking ahead is all about choices. And I think the choices that every business owner is going to go through at this stage is who you keep and why. And that's not just about your staff, that is about your client base as well. Who you lose and why. And that, again, is a really important question on who you lose and why. Because if you start to make people redundant or you lose certain clients, what effect does that actually have on your business and to the business? What do you look for in the people that you are keeping? And therefore, what are you looking for in the people that you may have to bring in to replace them? And I think the big question that I always ask myself when, certainly in sort of the early 2000s, I'd just taken on at Computer People and the .com crash happened. And obviously there was a big recovery in the marketplace at that time. And I looked at the simple question of why do people actually work for me? What is it they actually want from me? And I was looking for two different types of people, and I wanted to react to two different types of people that I found. And I found that I had people that loved to work for the company, and I had people who liked to work for the company. I had people that were in it, recruitment, just for that personal justification, that personal gratification of doing a really excellent job. And then I had other people that were in it just purely for money. And it all boiled down to that. The choices are that really in times of recession, it is all about your people, and it's all about people come first. Your consultants come first. And if you really look after your consultants and train and develop your consultants, then what actually happens is the knock-on effect is that they'll look after your clients and your candidates. And by having consultants that are genuinely love what they do, and they are there for their personal gratification rather than chasing profit and chasing money, they will genuinely look after your clients. And what you find by that is that your clients will look after you, and therefore the profit comes. So it's what you should be asking your people now is, what is it they like about working for you? Why do they work for you? Because you want to really understand what your workforce actually looks like. Because when recession bites, and this is going to be a very short, sharp shock recession, and then the bounce back, as we've seen, looking at all the data that we have, will become very, very quick. So we need to think about the type of people that you want in your business and the type of people you want sort of stood by you fighting for survival, because some people will be fighting survival. Some people will be fighting for take market share. You want those people that want to be there. They want to justify their place there, not the people who are just there because you're paying them to be there. And so investing in your people is really important, and investing in their mental and physical capabilities is really important. And I think that's what we need to start to look at. So
Howard, if I could just interject as well, I think you make you make some brilliant points here. And there's been some interesting conversations you and I have had with various organizations over the last 3-4 weeks regarding this very point about the people they have already, and what behaviors they've been demonstrating whilst working for the business, or indeed being furloughed. And I've certainly had conversations where we've been talking about behaviors and values. And I think that this kind of extreme situation we find ourselves in is where you witness the personalities, the real personalities and behaviors of the people that you work with. And I think that also applies to society. We see the best and worst of people during these sort of times. And so I think that employers, there'll be lots of you guys listening that will be nodding your heads. You've been witnessing great behavior from people you're working with. And you've also been, I'm sure, occasionally disappointed with some of the behaviors you've been witnessing. And I think that, as Howard's just said, you need to think hard about the new era, the new modern world of work as we get into it, and be thinking pretty hard about the people you've got. Are they going to be there, as Howard's just suggested, prepared to get out there and fight? Because make no mistake, we're not going to sit here today and say that it's going to be a catastrophe, that awful things are going to be happening, because we've worked through recessions and we've survived and prospered during those times. But I'll tell you now, we're going to have to fight really hard. It is not going to be easy. It's not going to be the best of times. And you're going to need people around you, as Howard says, that love working for you, that want to be a part of your business, that are loyal, are going to go the extra mile. And they've also got to be people who are going to embrace the new technologies that we're going to be bringing into our businesses, artificial intelligence, who to some extent are going to be perfectly comfortable sitting in front of cameras, being media savvy. And you're going to need to look at those guys and say, who is going to jump over the trench with me when we blow the whistle? And you'll know already, I suspect, who those guys are. And back to Howard's earlier point as well, it's a great time to be looking for new talent for your businesses. And I said the Bain thing made a point about hiring staff. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? At a point when other people may be getting rid of staff, but what a brilliant opportunity to improve the quality of your team, to look for additional people who can make a huge difference to your company going forward. Because in the end, our business is always and has always been a very straightforward, simple business. People buy people. And that will never be more true than the period we're about to enter. People buy people. It's about trust. It's about developing relationships. So what a chance to go and find some great talent to bring into your company, whilst also reviewing the people you have, putting time and energy into training and developing those people, and making some tough decisions too about some of the people you have in your businesses.
So that sort of leads to sort of like then, Paul, when we sort of talk about that, finding people that are right for your business and training and development. So really, what characteristics are people going to need to be fit for purpose for the new age? And I think there's a real interesting view there of what characteristics, and I'll come to mine in the end, what characteristics I believe are right for staff that you want to either engage with and take on, develop and keep during this period. I think there's a certain characteristics that you look for. We started to mention some of them, but give us an idea of the characteristics that you would normally look for people when we go into recession.
And this is a great question because, funny enough, I was talking to my very first boss, Jo Long, last night on the phone. She used to be my area manager, God bless her, back in the Alfred Marks Bureau days when I was 22, and she used to phone me up and nag me for my figures on a Friday evening, and I refused to give them. I was always the last one to give figures. I was desperately trying to count up the hours from my temporary staff and trying to force through the last placement. And we've been friends ever since. She was one of the founder directors of Office Angels, so she was my boss again. And she was asking me the same question, what kind of characteristics, Paul, do you think are going to be important going forward? And I said, Jo, I think this takes us back to the 70s and 80s, where we actually presented candidates verbally, hi, Mr. Client, I've got this candidate sitting next to me, and this is what he or she does, and this is a background and experience, and you used your power of influence. I've always told people that whilst I had glossy job titles in those days, the truth was I was a telesales clerk. I was a telesales guy. I sat on the phone from morning, noon till night, 100 phone calls, ear burning, throat aching, and basically sold all day long my candidates verbally. Now, what's interesting, to back to your question, is that I think with technology now, like the stuff we're using right now, we're going to go back to influencing clients again. We're going to need people who have the ability to influence, who have the ability to use high emotional intelligence, that they're perceptive, they're sensitive people. They have great communication skills. They're very comfortable using technology, so they're capable of doing the stuff we're doing right now. and they are driven to try and present their candidates both verbally, and of course we're going to get this opportunity to start presenting candidates visually. Now, actually, this is really good news because it's going to take us away from being CV chuckers, from being people that sit behind keyboards and just sending emails containing what are unquestionably one-dimensional sales tools, i.e. ACV, which, to be frank, is a pretty poor way and a pretty poor method of presenting candidates. The kind of people we're going to be looking for are going to have very, very high levels of emotional intelligence if they're going to be the people you're going to put in front of clients and candidates. And I think this is great news. For me, this is kind of back to the future, only it's better. It's not just us talking on the phone, it's us talking to people and using visual communication. So this is a brilliant opportunity, and you're going to be looking at your people and asking yourself, do I have those kind of personalities in my organization right now? Can I develop and cultivate them further? And can I bring in other people who are as media savvy as these people? And what kind of training and development do I need to be giving these people as we start to move forward?
So it's very interesting. I've sort of looked at that and sort of said it's to me, it's all about the service that you give your candidates and your clients, and you're looking for consultants who are really service orientated. You want people who can knock down doors and open doors for you, but once you get through those doors, and I think this is where the 360 model will start to sort of dissolve a little bit, and always dissolves really in that sort of marketplace in time of recession, is that you want people who can open an opportunity and then capitalize on that opportunity. And capitalizing on the opportunity is about the service that you give your clients and your candidates throughout that whole process. And I think what COVID has also done is making the world a lot more touchy-feely. And that lot more touchy-feely process going through that will become paramount to what's going on. And I think we've got to look at that in a very positive mindset. And I know we're going to talk about mindset later on, but having a real positive mindset is paramount to getting yourself through recession and on that up curve really, really quickly. It's almost in the, I think I remember sort of in the 2008 session talking about the rules of recession. The rules of recession is you don't talk about recession, because the more you talk about recession, the more you think of recession. The more you think about recession, the more you build the negative mindset that we're in a recession. So the less you talk about recession, the more you actually start to move into a positive mindset. So it's really about sort of driving that sort of mindset in there and becoming very, very service orientated, looking at the clients that you have, what extra service can you add to them that will benefit them, and what new clients can you take market share from your competition by providing a far more service orientated recruitment process that gives you an opportunity to take market share. Now, that's not about reducing cost. That's not about reducing fees and reducing margins. That's about increasing fees and increasing margin by providing better value to your clients. And if you provide better value to your clients, you may find that your margin stays still or actually increases rather than decreases. If you get into a bidding war, then you start to lose value. So I think the big question sort of comes on that, Paul, is how do you win market share during a recession?
So Howard, I think you've just touched on something that's really a critical point. One of the other characteristics of a recessionary market is in our industry's awful knee-jerk reaction to starting to slash prices. And we're going to see that. You're going to have people around you, guys, who are going to feel that the only way they can deal with the recessionary climate is to lower their prices, and I think that we are going to need to resist that at all costs. I mean, it's a downward spiral. The moment you start dropping your fees, you're entering a price war that you cannot win. You're decreasing your margins. Your costs remain fixed. They ain't going to go down. And you're just reducing your opportunity to be profitable. In my mind, it's always been a lazy method of gaining market share, dropping price. And the awful part about it is the moment you drop your price and the market improves, the recession disappears, we start seeing uplift. Good luck in trying to get your prices up again, because clients remember, it was fine. You were prepared to drop your prices, then now things are improving, you want to increase. It's not a great place to be. Back to Howard's point, you're going to have to be strong around this. And how do you justify maintaining your margins or even increasing them? It's exactly what Howard was just talking about. You need to provide better quality of service. You need to up your game in terms of the way you support your clients and candidates. But we've got that opportunity. And I think that we've talked a lot, for example, recently around embracing video technology. And that, I think, gives us an opportunity to provide retained, exclusive service to our clients. Now, what's interesting about that is that once you start to build deeper trust with your clients and you start to work more exclusively with them, you can hold the line on price to a large extent. And you're expanding and developing the type of services you provide. Now, I've said for a very long time that in our industry, we do a great job up to the point of placing candidates, as this is just as an example. But once we've placed candidates, the clients don't hear from us any longer. Why aren't we involved in onboarding candidates? Why aren't we involved in mentoring candidates once they've joined companies? What's going on regarding after sales service? Because it seems to me in our industry, we're pretty poor at that. Very few recruiters do much in terms of mentoring or providing onboarding services following a placement, for example. And there are a bunch of other services that we can also provide. We are going to need to consider diversification. And I'm very careful when I use that word. And I want to come back to this point. I don't necessarily mean when we talk diversification, start to trade in other sectors, other disciplines, although that's another question we will come back to. I do mean, though, expanding your support services, expanding the things you can provide to your clients. HR services, as an example, might be something we could provide. Anything that's people related is something as businesses we can get involved in. You already do a lot of that, I'm sure, but this is a time to start looking at that and looking at not just saying we can provide psychometric testing for candidates, but actually doing it and doing far more to actually technically improve the quality of our selection process, the way in which we support our clients through the whole interviewing process, the way in which we support candidates and so forth. And it's those improvements, I often talk about the 1% improvements in every area, that will enable you to propel yourself above your competitors and hold the line on price. And actually, over a period of time, even increase your margins. But please don't get into a price war, because it's something that is bad news for everybody in our industry. And it actually isn't good news for our clients, because ultimately, if you cut price, you're going to have to cut the quality of your service over a period of time.
I think it's interesting that we talked about this quite a lot. And I work with my clients on something that I call the 5 Ps to help them take market share and dominate their market. It'd be interesting sort of going away as leaders of your business and talking to people within your business, or if you're a one-person business on this call, asking you the same questions from this. The questions from my point of view is, if you pitch your client, as the first P is pitch, can you pitch your client within 2 minutes? Does your client walk away feeling, I want to know more about that, I want to work with you? They walk away thinking you've actually offering something different, something better than they've already got. The first thing that the client will do if they walk away and you've got a really good pitch and a really sharp pitch is they're going to check your profile out. So what does your profile actually look like? So if you've got a really sharp profile on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc., then it's going to start to give the client a view of what your service actually looks like. But if you're the typical recruiter that has pictures of your recruitment business out on the beer, etc., you know, what does that actually say to a client, and what does that actually look like to a client? So your profile is really, really important. And I've said this to lots of companies that, you know, the people like IBM, Microsoft, Apple, etc., all give huge incentives to their workforce, including beer, including trips, etc. They just don't publicize them like recruitment does. So there's a place where you can publicize them, and there's a place where we should need to change to become more of a professional operating body. Once you start to look at the publicity, how you're viewed on the marketplace, they'll start to see what you actually publish out there? What are you actually sending out in the marketplace? So what you actually publicate is really important. So how often do you put things on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc.? What do those things actually say? If you're just posting jobs, then clients aren't really interested in jobs. They're interested in what you can actually do for them. So really what you make sure is what you're publicating is positive. It attracts both candidate and client and drives those to you, which then leads on to the fourth P, which is product. Your product is what you actually sell to your candidates and clients, and your candidates themselves are your product. So if you're calling a candidate and a candidate knows who you are, whether you've ever spoken to before, because of what you publicate constantly, it starts to show that you are influencing the marketplace. The same if you're having to make BD calls and you pick up a call to a client, and the client knows you are because of what you've been doing on LinkedIn. Again, it starts to show that you're influencing the marketplace. If you get what you publicate correct, it will start driving clients towards you. So you're driving candidates and clients towards you rather than having to go find them. Again, that's all about that marketing inbound and outbound experience that clients should be seeing daily. And that leads to the final one, which is the most important one, which is partnership. If you can partner with really good clients and really good candidates, and you can partner in a way that other clients and candidates see that, and they go, if they're working with that client, then I should be working with this company. That is the premise of all the P's, that if you start to really get into the marketplace where you are working with the influencers in the marketplace as a partner, then by default, you become the key influencer in the marketplace. Hence why when Paul's talking about diversification, if you stray away from your niche brand, then it's very hard to partner with people who are absolutely the top of that marketplace, because you're not at the top of the marketplace. So if you look at those 5 Ps and followed those, and I do quite a lot of training courses around those, then you can start to develop your profile completely across the business, and that starts to attract business to you. And I think when recession comes, clients look for those agencies out there who are being positive, putting a really good vibe into the marketplace, and then once they engage with them, provide them with the most ultimate service. So I think, what can we add, Paul, that's to our service that actually truly differentiates us or is different to what we are currently doing at the moment?
So look, I think just before I answer your question, Howard, I've just put a note out to the guys listening. Feel free to raise some questions, guys. And if you want to come on and talk, we'd love to have you, hear your voice. You don't have to, if you don't want to be on the screen, but we'd love to hear your voices. And in previous weeks, we've had that and it's been really useful. So your ideas, your thoughts would be great. It's certainly not just about Howard and I and our views. So feel free to get stuck in. I would love to hear from you. But just to answer your question, I would say, you used the phrase, I think last week, Howard, where you talked about now's the time to be consultative, be a consultant, not a consultant, which made me smile. I think that's true. We are going to be looking for people that are experts. Now, if you check out the phrase consultant in the Oxford English Dictionary, it actually says, and this may make people smile, it says a teacher. So, what a consultant really is, what does it do? What does a person do? They pass on knowledge and experience. They provide wisdom, if you like, but they certainly talk about their knowledge that is, in a sense, greater than the person that they're imparting it to. That's what consultants do. They support, they help give direction to people that they're working with. Now, reasonably, lots of consultants in our industry don't do that. They sit behind screens and keyboards and they send out emails. They live behind the screen. We need people to start working as proper consultants. And if you think about consultants outside of our industry sector, they tend to charge quite a heavy fee. You go and see a medical consultant, I guarantee you won't see a lot of change, that's for sure. But we pay money, good money, to people whose advice we treasure, that we value. That's the positioning that we have to take. If you're going to gain market share during a recession, your clients are going to feel confused and are going to be concerned and worried about the climate. They are going to need a lot of guidance and support from experts. That's us. That's us. We need to be there for them, and we need to be giving them strong guidance. How are we going to do that? Well, it ain't going to happen by chucking out CVs purely from behind a screen. We need to be in front of our clients, constantly meeting them. If that means virtually meeting them at the moment, that's fine. But we need to be constantly talking to them, listening to them, understanding their worries, understanding their concerns, and providing guidance to them. Now, some of that is clearly not chargeable, and we're more than happy to provide that consultative support, because ultimately it will mean that customers will provide us with the roles that they have, the job opportunities they have, both permanent and temporary. Now, I talked about temporary and interim market a minute ago, and I do think that's a very important point. You know, being a perm only business is great during a healthy economy. But if you are not presently providing temporaries or interims, you absolutely need to be thinking pretty hard about it right now, because the opportunities are going to be in that sector. You're going to need, if you haven't got financial support, meaning you're going to need a finance arm to provide the capital to support the temporary staff, because obviously interim staff get paid before we do. So you know what I mean, and you'll need to be talking to the players out there that will provide that, the ultimate finances, the seaman finances, and so forth. Those guys are out there. We should be already talking to them about getting that support. Now, I think there's a very important point here, Howard, and I think that's to do with specialization. You know, we've had this phrase, inch wide, mile deep, going around in our industry sector for some period of time. You know, I've come from, as everybody knows, an office sector background back in the day. I haven't been in it for 12 years, but my background was there in the old days. Generalist recruitment. There are still lots and lots of generalist recruiters out there. But I think you'll find a lot of the really successful generalist recruiters, ironically, have expert recruiters within their specialist sectors within their businesses. So they have a finance division, they have an IT division and so forth, but within those areas, they have experts. I think that our industry is now about niche recruitment. You can no longer say you're an IT recruiter. You have to be very specific about what areas of IT you're involved in. And I think that this is a chance for us to analyze which particular areas we're going to work in. Be warned, if you try to spread yourselves too thinly across a whole range of sectors, it will damage your core service. So by all means, explore other areas that you believe you can work in, but be very aware that if you do not possess the expertise to penetrate those markets, your time and energy spent in trying to get into those areas will diminish the time you need to be spending in your core sectors, and that could damage your business. So it comes down to, do you have the people in your business to enable you to get into those sectors? Do you have the knowledge and experience? And can you delegate to people in your business? Because if you're going to focus on new sectors, that means you're going to be spending less time in your existing sectors, yet they still need maintenance and development. So who do you have in your business that's going to step up to the mark? What training do they need? Where are your next leaders coming from? And who's helping you to develop and train those people? These things need to be reviewed and looked at. And in a sense, your focus needs more focus. So if you move out of your core offering, you better be sure that you've got the right people in your business to support you whilst you do that. Or you go and find people. As I've already said, there's going to be lots of talent opportunities for us to bring into the business, our businesses. You need to bring in people to help you to support yourselves as you get into those new areas. But be very, very careful. In my opinion, stick to your knitting, because that's what you know best. We need to look at how we improve what we do in our main core areas.
I think from that, Paul, I think that sort of leads to that sort of big thing is, what do managers require out of recession? And I think, to me, that is all about mindset, the mindset of the manager and the mindset of the team that manager runs. And I think as goes the head, goes the business. And I think we've got to sort of really look at that. If you are being negative about your marketplace, sorry, something's just cropped up on my thing. If you're being negative about the marketplace, then what you'll find is that your team are being negative about the marketplace as well. And you've got to really make sure that you are being positive constantly all the way through. And I think the mindset of your team is really important. No one's born optimistic and no one's born pessimistic. And I'll give an example of this. I did a training course to some people about 4 or 5 weeks ago on a webinar. So if there's people on there, please don't answer the question. But if you haven't been on that webinar, please answer the question. It was by a guy called Sean Acor, who was a university lecturer at Harvard. So he did all his university studying at Harvard, stayed, did his doctorate at Harvard, and then started to lecture at Harvard. And I met this chap, and we were having a conversation about business. And I actually said, yeah, what do you really know about business? You spent all your life at Harvard. And I got a very shocking answer back, and a very interesting answer. He said, well, how do you see Harvard? And I say, I see Harvard as the elite, the richest people, the most cleverest people, etc. He said, that's absolutely right. He said, would you understand it if I said Harvard has the biggest suicide rate and the biggest depression rate in the United States university systems? And I said, no, why is that? And he said, think. Before you went to Harvard, you were probably in the 1% of your school for brains, the top 1%. You were probably the richest person in your school, the top 1%. Now you've come to Harvard, you're now 50% of you are below average, and only 1% is in the same position as you were before. And so it creates pessimistic and optimistic outputs from people. And he was saying, because we're not born pessimistic, we're not born optimistic, it is a creation of the environment that you're around. And that is why managers' mindsets need to be pessimistic and optimistic. And I said, so what does pessimism and optimism mean to people? He said, well, I did a very interesting study on that. And I did a test. And this is the test I want you guys to try answer the test. And the test is this. He took 200 people. He reviewed them for pessimism and optimism and scaled them on each level on where they were. So 0 to 100 on the optimist, 0 to 100, with 100 being the most pessimistic and 1 being the most, the least. He then said, right, okay, I'm going to give you a direction. You need to go to this direction. You need to be there. You need to have no money in your pockets, nothing at all on you whatsoever. You will be checked when you get there by the adjudicators, and then we'll give you the instructions. So at the same time, they all went out into the area of Harvard and were stood in front of a shop. He gave each person a $10 bill and said, your job is now to go into that shop, spend $10. You can't come out with the same $10 bill. We have a note on the $10 bill, so we know which one it is. You need to come out with an item and a receipt. Can you do it? And that's all he gave. That was the only question is. So the question to you guys is very simple. Do you think you can do it, or do you not think you can do it? All you have is $10. You've got to go into a shop, buy an item for $10, get a $10 item, get a receipt, and come back out with $10. That is the game. So can you do it? And it's really interesting when I start to people about this, how many people say, no, I can't, how many people say, yes, I can. So the optimistic people will start to look for reasons that how they can do this. The pessimistic people close off their mindset to it. And what he actually did was he placed a $10 bill at the bottom of the door as you open the shop door. The optimistic people, because they knew there was something there was something that had to be able to do for them to actually do that process without committing a crime. And because they were really, really open and looking for opportunities, 90% of the optimistic people spotted the $10 note. 90% of the pessimistic people missed it because they couldn't believe that it was possible and therefore closed their eyes off to an opportunity. And when we go into recession, it's looking for those opportunities in your current client base and looking for your opportunity in the marketplace that is really important. So being really optimistic about the marketplace from a management point of view and creating that optimistic mindset within your team is absolutely important. So managers that truly care about their people and develop their people tend to develop a really optimistic outlook of what's going on. And that's the difference between love and like, we talked about earlier from a consultant's point of view. If they love doing what's going on in the business and they love recruitment, they'll be very optimistic about what's happening with the business, and they'll be looking for opportunities to actually grow the business.
So Howard, I think there's a few good comments coming up on the questions here, and I don't know, is Jim there? Is Jim Roach in the background? Jim? So he got his thumb in the air. We bring Jim in, if it's possible to find him. Howard, is he there?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find him.
He's doing that. I'll just point here from Sarah Collins, really good one. Back to basics. We've got to get on the phone and online and get away from endless emails. In addition, the longevity and experience of consultants will mean a lot to clients and candidates. And that's a really, really good point. And Jim saying is there. I love this comment from Aideen Duggan. I've found meetings via Zoom to be more meaningful. Clients are appreciating the effort. Hey, Jim.
Morning. I didn't have the Q&A open. I couldn't see that. I was just looking at the chat.
How are you, sir? You well?
I'm very good. Morning to you both.
Morning. I just wanted to bring you in, Jim. We're talking here about upping our game, looking for opportunities to increase market share. And Howard rightly is talking about positive mindsets of leaders. We're moving into how we should behave as people managing staff and so forth during a very worrying and concerning period. Well, what's your view about that?
Yeah. No, I was listening, luckily. I wanted to disagree with Howard on something, but only very minorly, because everything he said since he said it, I agree with. And it's about the positive mindset. If you think you can do it, you can.
Yeah.
My view is that actually above fee percentage right now, the most critical factor is that we get paid for doing the work we do. And in contingency recruitment, flawed model, we as an industry fill 1 in 4, 1 in 5 roles that we take on. So actually, I think the biggest factor in terms of getting money is that fill rate. So I think what we need is for our consultants to really believe that they can gain genuine exclusive business, and potentially on a retained basis. We believe we can get jobs in, and we believe that the clients will give us a bit of exclusivity. We don't really believe it, because actually we know that most of the time, once we advertise a job, some little Johnny out there will spot the job and think, I know who that is. I'm going to bung a couple of candidates in, and the client will see them. And they'll do it quicker because they don't bother qualifying them. And so your exclusivity is out the window. So I think it's putting that positivity across to the clients to really get them to buy into working exclusively with a proper market leading agency, that it will be the biggest differentiator. It's worked for us this week. We've picked up 7 exclusive roles on a retained basis. We did drop our fees very slightly, but we dropped them by 13%. But by my calculations, if we fill 1 in 2 rather than 1 in 5, we're going to get 40% more money. To be pessimistic, if we fill 1 in 3 rather than 1 in 4, we get 25% more money. So the maths work. I would like to think that actually in most situations we don't need to cut the cost at all. We just improve the service, and we've worked a lot on that in terms of upping our game on our service offering, which I can go into, but I'll go back to you guys.
Jim, thanks ever so much. I think there's some great points there, and I think you've highlighted something we were talking about earlier, which is that using the technologies we're talking about, and people are commenting that, using Zoom, as the clients are liking it. Let's not forget that, this whole point about social distancing, that's not going anywhere, folks. I mean, we're going to be living with social distancing for the foreseeable future. Candidates and clients are going to be slightly nervous, let's be honest, to meet each other face to face for a while. So you're going to need to be using video platforms to encourage people to meet each other, in inverted commas, in the very near future. That will become an embedded behavior for our industry as time goes on, which is very good news. I think Jim's point about exclusivity is spot on. We've got this chance, and he's right to connect it to positive mindset, to get closer to clients, to exude confidence, to improve the quality of our service, and gain the opportunity to work on roles exclusively. That also leads to retained business, meaning that we can look at our pricing models, because where we work exclusively, and search and selection businesses have been doing this for years, you get a third up front when you take on the assignment, and generally in their model, it's a third upon completion of the first interviews, and then the third upon the placement. There are variations on that theme that go around, but I think that here's the point. We should be working more on roles that we know we can fill, that we are committed to filling, the clients are committed to working with us. And in order to find the time to do that, to Jim's point, you've got to stop working on a lot of the contingent roles where, frankly, what clients want you to do is just enter a foot race, chucking CVs in the vain hope that occasionally one or two of our CVs hit targets. But that's just not consultative work. So here's our chance to do that. At the point I wanted to make earlier that I kind of let slip is that one of the other methods that we have of building business during this downturn will be the good old-fashioned basics of upselling and cross-selling. That, we've already mentioned cross-selling, which of course is to some extent providing temps or interims contractors if you're providing perms, and vice versa, but upselling as well, looking for the opportunities within an organization where you've established, or you can establish, deeper relationships with the people you work with. Now, the quickest way to win new business, and this is from Harvard or any other business school, is upselling, cross-selling, and increasing your margins. But we have those opportunities coming up now, and you guys need to be identifying, as I'm sure you are, the customers, your clients who are already engaged with your business, and we need to be having conversations with them now about what they're going to be doing or what they think they might be doing in terms of recruitment going forward. And you want to be getting greater opportunity share from them to exclude your competitors. You're not going to do that by sitting in your offices, hiding behind screens. You know that. We need to be in front of clients, and keep on emphasizing being in front of clients is easily achieved through the media that we're using today. I think Jim's absolutely right about that whole area of projecting positivity. And that really means getting closer to organizations and getting your people closer to organizations as we go forward.
I think some of that, Paul, is very much, and Rosa said it here absolutely on the chat room, is that it is about back to basics, and those that cut corners won't last very long. And I've been saying that for years and years and years. If you get the core basics of recruitment right and do them day in, day out, you will become a very, very, very good recruiter. Clients will look for experts and people to partner with that really add value. And I think Dave O'Connell has said it as well here. A great approach is to find the pressure and offer a solution. Look where the money is being spent and follow it. It's really important and smart in terms of how you operate. And I think all the way through recession, there'll be some industries where some clients will be doing absolutely nothing and other clients will be spending an awful lot of money. A lot of clients see an opportunity as a recession is to spend their way out of recession and take market share from other people. And it's very important that you start to follow the clients that have that mindset, that they are going to come out of recession come what may. There's also an awful lot of companies that come up in recession. So our mindset is really important, that we've got to really look for those opportunities and drive into those opportunities. It is about creating a value opportunity. And we've been talking on these webinars for the last 6 or 7 weeks about moving from that transactional bum on a seat recruiter to a genuine relationship-based recruiter. And that means you've got to walk away from roles that are just simply impossible to fill, or you're in competition with another 10 agencies to try and fill that recruiter, or your client is simply trying to drive your prices down because they believe there's an opportunity to do that because of recession. You've got to take an opportunity to walk away and look for better business. There is business out there. And I think I said in 2008, one of my really early LinkedIn posts was, there is no such thing as recession for a recruiter. Only one that can't find a client that's buying. Because whatever happens in recruitment, there is always clients buying. And when I put that on LinkedIn, I got a shed full of negative comments. It's a recession. I'm in this trade. There's a massive recession in this trade, blah, blah, blah. And people were really giving me a whole world of abuse. And then all of a sudden, those consultants that started to make money started to come onto the feed, and they were going, well, actually, I'm in the same industry as you. I've had my best year whatsoever. I'm in that same market. I am having a great year. I'm having this, I'm having that. And it was really interesting. It was all a mindset. And it was all that mindset that is, if you believe there's a recession, then your business will go into recession.
Yeah.
If you believe there's opportunity, you'll take that opportunity. And I've got to admit, when I started in recruitment in 2001, employment was worse than it is going to be. It was at 10.5%. I had my biggest years in those first 3 or 4 years building out of recession, and it was all about the value that you gave to your clients and gave to your candidates. So mindset is really, really important, and I think that's the thing that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
We're getting to the hour, Paul. I wanted to ask one last question. However, I think this question is going to probably fall into next week's webinar more than anything else. Next week's webinar, we're going to look at a practical guide of mindset for business leaders and managers coming out of recession and how we can do that. And I was going to ask the question, Paul, that you, as leading one of the biggest people businesses in the UK, OA, what was the reasons that OA grew during the recession? But I think the answer that I know that you probably want to give is not going to be a very short answer. Mm-hmm. And as we're very struck for time, I think it'd be a great idea to push that into next week's webinar as part of next week's webinar. I'd like to say, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to throw some questions at us or any comments at us. I think it'd be really, interesting to hear what people have to say. Or if anybody wants to put their comments across to the rest of the people on this webinar, feel free to either put your hand up as a participant in the participant box or just ask a question from there. Because I think this topic could go for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I think it's really important that we get everything right now and put our mindset and results based business forward now, because if you try to do it in 6 months when the market is coming back, you're going to be too late.
So Howard, I think that we're already doing this. I think any leader of any business right now is working flat out in maintaining morale in their businesses with their people. Not only that, their own morale. There's a lot of discussion around leaders who are, let's face it, no less human than, despite what their staff think, than their own people. We're all of us having our moments, inverted commas, during this difficult, extremely challenging period. But we are going to have to demonstrate as we come back to work, huge leadership qualities, some of which we've never had to exhibit in the past. And I'm going to answer your question very quickly. And as you say, we need to talk a lot about this next week. I would give you 4 qualities that I think people need. And you've mentioned office angels. We'll talk about that next week. But I would say you need an empathetic attitude towards your people and indeed your candidates and clients. You need huge levels of awareness. So spending a almost disproportionate period of time looking at market trends, looking outside of your business, talking to clients, attending network opportunities when we're allowed to, really understanding your markets and the people in them, the movers and the shakers, is hugely important. You should be prepared. This may sound very peculiar to lots of people, but you should be prepared to demonstrate your own vulnerability. That doesn't mean that you open up and you show huge doubts and concerns or weaknesses, but you should be prepared to be seen as human, as the same as everybody else. No one expects you to be, as a leader, without your weaknesses, and in expressing them to an extent, you're empathizing with the people that you work with. And very importantly, you need to demonstrate compassion towards the people you work with and compassion to your candidates and clients. And I'll lead on to that next week when we talk about the very special skill sets that are required to develop a business during a challenging economy, because we can all be brilliant leaders when the economy is charging forward, and in our industry, we can make lots of money. It's dead easy to be upbeat and be very happy and very personable, but we're about to discover just what we and our people are made of, because we are already in a period of adversity that's going to continue for a period of time. It's at these times that we really understand the behaviors and values of our people. And indeed, we have an opportunity to demonstrate our own brilliant leadership skills. And that's what we need to be talking about next week.
Guys, I'd like to thank you for attending. Very much appreciated by Paul and I, those people who've attended virtually all of our webinars.
Thank you, guys.
Very much appreciated. I'm trying something new this week. So this week, as you log off, you may get a link to next week's webinar, so you can instantly book onto next week's webinar. So I'm just trialing that, see how it goes. If any of you guys have got any questions that you want to ask Paul and I on a personal level with regards to your business that you didn't want to put across on the webinar, feel free to get in contact with us. We are always happy to try help people and listen to people. And that just leaves Paul and I to say thank you very much for attending. Stay fit, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.